it's talking to you and taking your advice is completely changing his life, and now he feels infinitely better.
Yeah. I mean, he did a lot of the work himself.
Well, he had to, but you had to tell him what to do. But luckily, he listened.
Yeah. I mean, I think giving him a life expectancy just kind of validated it for him. It just really put it in his face. And, because that's something you can calculate. He's like, okay, well, I'm 53 now. 63 doesn't seem that far off.
Right.
A
lot of high stress individuals that don't take care of themselves, their ticker checks out.
Yeah.
Around 65, 67. That's pretty standard.
It just takes its toll. I mean, and the funny thing is, when you go back and you look at the pictures of him prior to.
Oh, yeah.
He does kind of look like he was about to pop,
It's not good. Yeah, he had a big old moon face, and he was,
The veins up on the forehead and the veins out of the side of the neck.
Thick. What was, first of all, how did he meet you? How did this come about, and, how did the conversation start?
So we have a mutual friend named Carrie Kasem. If you remember Casey Kasem.
Yeah, I know
Weekly
Carrie.
Top 40.
I worked with her back in the day in the early UFCs.
Okay. So, I recently met Carrie, and she had kind of a life-changing experience as well. If you know anything about her journey with Lyme disease and chronic viral infection, I mean, she really struggled and ended up healing herself. And she took the same test that Dana White did. It was life-changing for her, and she was like,
what is this test?
It's a genetic test. It looks at genetic methylation pathways. So
methylation pathways?
Methylation
pathways.
What's
that word mean?
So think about it like this. We pull crude oil out of the ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can't put crude oil into your gas tank, right? Because the car doesn't understand that fuel source. So what happens is crude oil has to be refined into gasoline, and then the car can run. Okay, so in human beings, there's a similar process called methylation. There's not a single compound known to mankind, not one. There's no vitamin, no mineral, no amino acid, no nutrient, no protein, no nutrient of any kind that enters the human body and is used in the format that we put it in. Without a single exception, everything we put into our bodies has to be refined into the usable form. If you can't make this conversion, you have a deficiency. It's this deficiency that leads to the most common ailments that we suffer from. So that process is called methylation, and there are several genes that govern it. This is where a lot of the misconception about genetically inherited disease comes from, right? We'll say, well, Joe, your father-in-law has, not your father-in-law, your father on your mom's side had hypertension, your grandfather had hypertension, now you have hypertension. So you have genetically inherited hypertension, or you have familial hypertension.
Well, and hypertension is commonly known as high blood pressure. Is that
high blood pressure. Yeah, high blood pressure. But 85% of all high blood pressure is what we call idiopathic, right? It's of unknown origin. So we say that things are genetically inherited because they run in families. But it's rarely the disease that's passed from generation to generation. What we pass from generation to generation is the inability to refine a raw material, which causes a deficiency, which leads to that disease.
And what generally leads to hypertension?
So if you look at Dana White's case, right, is a perfectly common case. In fact, the Journal of Hypertension published an article in November 19th of 2017, if you want to look that article up, and essentially linking an amino acid in the bloodstream called homocysteine to hypertension. And the reason for this is you got homocysteine in your blood. I've got it in my blood. Everybody listening to this podcast has homocysteine. But if you have an impaired ability to break homocysteine down, right, to take that amino acid, homocysteine, and convert it into a harmless amino acid called methionine, if you can't make this conversion, homocysteine rises. It causes something called hyperhomocystinemia, high homocysteine in the blood. When homocysteine rises, it becomes one of the more inflammatory compounds in the human body. As it's cruising by the inside lining of the artery, it starts to irritate the artery. It actually reduces the artery's elasticity and can even cause it to constrict. So think about this. You've got 63,000 miles of blood vessel, roughly, in your body. It doesn't take much narrowing to drive pressure up. Think about it. 85% of all hypertensive diagnosis of high blood pressure, primary hypertension or essential hypertension are idiopathic, right? Unknown origin. Only 15% of them are secondary hypertension, of where we know the exact cause. And so what we do is we take people that have high blood pressure. We run a bunch of tests on them. EKG, it's normal. EEG, it's normal. Heart and lung sounds, cardiac cath, dye contrast study. We do all of these cardiovascular tests, and they all come out normal. Yet the person still has high blood pressure. And that's largely because the high levels of homocysteine are causing vascular narrowing. I mean, this is a fixed system, right? So if I make the pipes smaller in a fixed system, pressure goes up. So in Dana's case specifically, and he's thrown his blood work out on the internet, so we can talk about his labs. But in his cases, he had one of the highest levels of homocysteine that I'd personally ever seen, and our clinical team had seen.
So when you say high blood pressure, could you define? Like, I'm not good at that. Whenever I get my blood pressure, they tell me the number and they say it's good. And I go, okay. But I don't know what's a good number.
So 120 over 70, 120 over 80.
And what's high?
130, 140, 150, 160.
When does it get dangerous?
140, 150 starts to get dangerous. People
Really?
walk around at 140, 150, 160 all the time.
And they don't know it.
It's the silent killer. You don't feel it. You think you would feel high blood pressure, but very often it's the silent killer because you don't feel it. It's not like you hear your blood rushing in your ears, although you may. It's not like you feel pressure in your head or pressure in your neck or pressure in your chest. That's why high blood pressure, hypertension, is one of the silent killers in cardiovascular disease, right? In fact, one of the first primary symptoms is sudden death, right? So we often put people on hypertensive medication before we actually look at whether or not they have high levels of homocysteine or whether or not they might